Hi, this is Mark News from Plant Talk Radio. Thanks for subscribing and listening to our Plant of the Week podcast, brought to you by Bonide Products, family made in America. Visit Bonide.com to find a retailer near you. Each week, Plant Talk Radio's Fred Hauer focuses on a plant that would be a great addition to your landscape. Now for this week's Bonide Products Plant of the Week. Fred, your Plant of the Week.
Well, the Plant of the Week I have chosen because right now it is in most part absolutely brilliant. Weeping cherry. Now, I have two that I can watch almost from my front porch that were planted no more than 3 years ago. They're growing like crazy, and right now they look like a pink waterfall. They were planted properly, nice wide hole, and just slightly high.
Of course they were planted properly. They're in your yard.
No, this is indeed across the street
from
me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And he did follow some good advice, but at the same time, they're hardly a waterfall, but his are so thick. And this is good for the moment, and we'll talk about maybe why it isn't always good. But anyhow, they're just absolutely magnificent and so full. Now, from a distance, it looks like a waterfall. If you get up close, of course, you can see not quite through the tree, but see a lot of it. And then I have a neighbor who has one that's considerably older, probably, 15 years at this point. And the bearing of that statement is because it was not thinned sufficiently. As the Plant of the Week, I want you to know that almost all weeping cherries are grafted. Now, my neighbor is a totally uninitiated horticulturist, and that's good. I've had a lot of chances to aid and assist. She did not know that her plant was three parts. The root of the cherry tree is of one kind, probably what we'll call wild. Then there are some straight up type that are grafted into that root structure. And then as soon as that takes a hold and starts to grow, then a little T-cut is put into that upright single stem, and one bud from a weeping cherry is placed in there, tied in with a rubber band, probably a little grafting wax so that it stays in tight. And as soon as it starts to grow and gets maybe 3 or so inches long, 4 inches, and they know the graft is going to take, they then cut the top of the tree off, the original tree. Yeah. Or the middle part, however you want to look at it. And what has happened then well, there have been several neighbors there. They did not know to thin the tree. And I will hopefully follow up on instructions with the other party that has the two to so to speak, teach them, instruct them, whatever, to take out a lot of the beautiful flowing branches now that are only roughly the size and thickness of a finger, because the two branches that have now been squeezed out on the older tree, and it doesn't leave too much of a deficiency, but at the same time, they've literally been outgrown by their by plant parts on either side of them, and they just literally get pinched out. So there's a kind of a void in that tree. Now, it isn't dying. It hasn't been killed. But when that happens, then the plant kind of reverts inside. And being a three-part plant, the junctures are not quite like what we'll call a whole tree from seed on. And the thing that happens quite frequently is on that 4 or 5 or even 6 foot straight up stem that they graft onto, there are some buds in that when the deficiency at the top hits and the plant's ready to go, it'll open up the buds on the lower shaft of the tree or trunk, and they start to grow. Now, those are what you definitely do not want. Either use your thumbnail when they're little tiny ones or a pair of hand pruners as soon as you can and cut off all of those, because they're going to turn and head straight up just like the trunk did. That is not what a weeping cherry should look like. I have seen them completely revert. Matter of fact, I watched one over a 10-year period that, let's just say I tried, but didn't win with the discussion. And the party let it go to where the rootstock and the straight up part of the plant took over. Uh-huh. The weeping part died. And now they have what I'll call a standard cherry tree. Still a little on the pretty side, but certainly not what it could have been if they had thinned it out, starting when it's young, kind of like a child. You straighten their teeth and their feet and their attitudes and get that done before they turn much past 13. Then you got a winner. But when you ignore it and then hand them their car keys at 16 with no prior instruction, then's when you have a problem. Well, a tree is really no different than that. You have to manage them a little bit. Not a spanking, but a pair of hard pruners sometimes.
So when you say thinning out the crown or that beautiful weeping part that everybody likes, what are you talking about as far as how much do you take out each year and how do you tell which ones to take?
Darn good question. I would have the lead on that because I've done it so many times. What you're trying to do is space the branches. Now, if the branches are growing out of a straight up trunk, you would simply go to a 12 or 18 inch measurement from one stem to another and kind of like the spokes of a wheel so that the branches have independent juncture with the trunk. In the weeping cherry, I still like to stay with that 25% factor, but I would encourage even up to 30 or 40% if necessary. Catch them while they're young. That's the best time. You're going to try to thin out so that what is maybe 15 stems, just to pick a number, initially, will become 3 to 5 at the very most over a 3-year period. So you're kind of taking a third a year, and you're working with spacing out the branches as they go around within that cut off crown part. So it's a hard question to answer, Mark, but let's just say that if it is 15 stems, you got it down to the best 5 that are well spaced around that trunk. In the third year, you've got a tree that will look a little thinner in the center, but it will still be beautiful on the outside and far better in terms of growth in the future.
Thanks again for listening to our podcast, brought to you by Bonide Products at Bonide.com. Plant Talk Radio offers other podcasts as well, including our daily Your Gardening Question podcast and our weekly Plant Talk Radio, all available on iTunes or your preferred podcast player. If you have a plant suggestion for Fred, send him an email, fred@planttalkradio.com.